Chris here?
I
Yes,
am.
yes.
Okay, Chris. Chris is a best-selling indie fantasy writer, and there are a lot of us in this group who are fantasy writers, and a lot of us who are interested in writing indie. And so I've asked him to talk about really just anything that he feels inspired or impressed to talk about this morning. Um, and with that, I'm going to let him take it away. We're going to have a question and answer after he talks for the next 20 or 30 minutes. So, Chris, go ahead and just, I don't know, dump all your wisdom on the table. You know, let your brain wriggle around, see how it goes. Okay.
It sounds good.
Okay. First of all, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Give us your background, where you are in your career, how you've gotten started, that kind of thing.
Sure. So I'm currently an indie author. I've been full-time since 2016. Before that, I was a self-taught iPhone engineer. So I taught myself to develop apps for the iPhone and iPad. Landed myself at a startup in Silicon Valley and worked alongside data scientists from Harvard and Stanford and all sorts of similar places. And I didn't understand what data science was at the time. And one of the companies was Amazon. And I got to watch as they started teaching their first primitive artificial intelligence how to sell books to people. And that turned the light bulb on in my head. And I had always wanted to be an author. So right then and there, I jumped in and said, okay, I'm going to start publishing novels alongside my day job as a software engineer. And I started putting out books in 2014. Kept doing it for the next year and a half, made more and more money as I learned how the data science worked, and my career kind of took off. And now I do this full time. I have helped literally hundreds of authors go full time. If you've seen somebody in science fiction and fantasy in the last probably 2 or 3 years break out, I probably know them. I probably helped them with their launch and told them a lot about how this works. We don't need gatekeepers anymore. There's nobody stopping us from doing this. I run this from basically my garage with my wife. It's just the two of us. And you'll see a really pompous screenshot in, in the presentation about how much money I'm making doing this.
Okay, sounds great. So you've got a presentation that you've already got prepared then?
I do. I'll go ahead and share my screen. Actually,
Okay.
It looks like that's currently disabled. I think we can turn that on though. I'm not sure who has permission. I would guess the first person in the room, maybe, or whoever started the meeting.
Let's see if I can give you permission. I'll check down here. But
Great,
since nothing on my computer seems to be working this morning, I think I'm going to have to reboot here in a minute. Let's see. Let's see.
Looking up instructions.
Okay. Yeah, share screen should be now on.
Oh, excellent. Okay. Let's give that a try. Yep, there it is. Okay, so I'm going to share Keynote. So you guys should all see Keynote. Everybody can see that now. Okay. I'm going to start the presentation. So I'm assuming you guys can hear me. Unless I hear otherwise, I'm just going to keep talking. If the internet goes south and I fade out for a few seconds, feel free to pop in and tell me to repeat what I just said. All right, so I think I can minimize this. Okay, so we just talked about who I was. This is the pompous screenshot that I had mentioned. One of my huge pet peeves is people claiming to be able to teach something they can't actually do themselves. So like, you know, if you're going to get somebody who's going to advise you on how to invest your money and they make $12 an hour, they probably don't have any of their own money invested, probably have no idea how to teach you how to do it. I know how to sell novels. I know how to sell novels today. Data science is what drives sales and understanding how Amazon reaches people. And our job is to teach Amazon what our tribe looks like, what our audience looks like, how it is different from other genres, so that Amazon knows how to sell our books for us. And if we can do that, this is kind of what a career can look like. I mean, you can sell a ton of books as an indie author. I've never gone through a publisher. All of this stuff is 100% me. And I can call myself a 7-figure author now pretty comfortably. I've made a lot of money from other sources as well. I've now spoken all over the country. Every major writing organization and podcast has had me on at some point to talk about how to do this, because I've got the keys to the kingdom and I'm just giving them out. If you read 5,000 words per hour, that's the writing part of it. You guys probably don't need that. But Right to Market is going to teach you a lot more about how to do this. And that's sort of what put me on the map, as we'll talk about. But today I wanted to go over 3 specific hard lessons that I learned that I wish was taught to every new author that came into this industry. And it doesn't matter if you're trad pub or you're indie, whatever you're doing, just the understanding of how you should be trying to approach selling books if you want to actually be able to sell them. Readers aren't buffalo, as I learned the hard way. I published my first novel back in 2014, and I had not a clue what to do, like most other people. Now, I worked at a startup. I had a pretty good salary as an engineer, so I could afford to buy some ads. I understood the basics of data science, so just enough to, with horror, watch as I screwed myself over and taught the algorithm that people who liked cookbooks and romance novels would, in fact, like my werewolf novel, and they shouldn't show it directly to horror fans. So I did all these things. I told every social media platform that my book existed. I signed up for new social media platforms to tell them that my book existed. I emailed every person on my contact list. I found forums, mostly of authors, because that's where I was already talking to people. And I told them about my books. I bought every ad. Like if somebody would offer to take my money and show my book, I didn't really vet them and see if they could actually do what they said they could do. I just handed them money. So I paid one company, Kindle Daily Nation, $600 to make my book the featured book of the day, where they put up like a banner ad, and I think I got like 9 sales. So all of these things are basically worthless, and it's what most people are trying to teach you to do. What we in fact need to do is change the way we think about sales. Readers are not buffalo. Your goal is not to go out there and bag a sale and cut off the horns and call it a day. This is a lifelong transaction. You want to bond with your readers. And if you're not bonding with your readers, they're going to leave and they're not going to keep buying your books. And even if you're making a living today, you are not going to be doing so in, let's say, 5 years. Readers are a lot more like an orchard. So on the left-hand side there, you can see small trees. Those are the habitual readers, and we'll discuss them. And on the right, you can see the occasional readers. Both of them are very useful. You want a combination of both, in my opinion. But if you start treating your audience like trees and tending to them, they will bear fruit over and over and over. So what that actually looks like from a practical standpoint is we have to deliver what the market wants. And we don't have to compromise. I'm not telling you to write something you don't want to write. You don't have to go write some genre that you think is really bad or that would not be fun. It's about finding the sweet spot between what you want to write and what the market wants to read. If you want to write obscure Klingon poetry, but you also want to write an epic fantasy, write the epic fantasy, because that's what's going to sell. You have to deliver what the market is interested in, not what you're interested in writing. And those intersections are key. Once you start doing that, you plant seeds. And I'm talking a lot of seeds. You're running experiments constantly interacting with your audience. You're writing reader magnets. And for those not familiar with the term, a reader magnet is from the term lead magnet, and basically just means we give them a book to sign up to our list. Here's a short story, here's a free novel. Now I have your email address. Every time I put out a book, I'm telling you about it. And so you're buying it and telling your friends. You can give them character sheets, artwork, maps, videos, anything you want to give them as long as it's of interest to them. And I'm always trying new seeds and sprinkling different types of seeds, and most of them don't sprout. But I look for the ones that do. And when I find the ones that do, those are the ones I double down and I focus on. I spend a half-hour time block every single day tending my crop, where I am posting in my Facebook group or Discord. Maybe I'm drafting a newsletter. Maybe I am recording a video. Maybe I'm writing a short story or answering some trivia questions. I'm doing something that's going to make my audience happy, make them thrilled to be there and tell other people about it. I want to become a part of their daily routine. They come in and they see what new information I've posted. They're very excited about the content that I provide. Once you have that whole setup, then and only then do you think about advertising. If you're spending money on advertising before you have the absolute best covers in the industry, best blurbs in the industry, and best product funnel in the industry, where your mailing list is set up and all of your I's are dotted and your T's are crossed, don't spend money on advertising. But once all those things are true and you're ready, you do have to spend money on advertising. It's an ugly reality. I spend between $5,500 and $12,000 a month in ads. But you can see for $5,500, I got 6 million pairs of eyes on my books. So this is sort of the fertilizer I sprinkle over the seeds that are sprouting. And what it looks like once you have all your pieces in place is your orchard bears fruit over and over and over throughout your career. And if you look at this, you'll notice in the beginning it starts out really low and then it starts spiking upwards. Well, the first time it hit $10,000, that was when I learned to write to market. So before that, I had 5 books out, and the most I ever made was $4,000 in 1 month. Then I put out 1 book, and that book took me over $10,000 and just kept shooting up as I released sequels. That's the power of writing to market. And over time, what I learned is, okay, you're doing great, and you put out this trilogy, but then you get the long tail, where if you're not putting out books, your sales are just dying. And so I had fits and starts for a long time, but eventually I figured out that if I use my backlist cyclically, I'm never going to have to go hungry again. And so you'll notice from December of 2018 forward, I've never had an ebook month lower than $10,000. And just so we're clear as we're going through the presentation, red is sales, blue is Kindle Unlimited page reads, and gray is paperback. So that should give you some idea of the difference between paperback sales and ebook sales and Kindle Unlimited page reads. I barely sell any paperbacks at all. Hard lesson number 2. We talked about readers being trees. What do I mean by that? Well, authors think about selling books and how can we get what we want? Well, really what we need to be thinking about is giving them what they want. Think about when you were a kid, first time you picked up a book, first time you got excited about whatever genre you read, fantasy, romance, mystery, whatever it is, what got you into reading? What made you so excited that you wanted to pick up a book and bury your nose in it rather than do any other activity in the world? And that you get to the point where you dress up in cosplay and you go to events. Who are these super fans and why are they reading? What emotional experience are they seeking? We need to be able to answer this question. And over time, we need to learn, how do they read? So are they reading on the commute to work? Are they reading 8 hours a day? How often are they buying new books? The more we know about our audience, the more and better we can tend to our orchard. So if you think about it like trees, if you don't know how to grow avocado trees and you don't know how to grow apple trees and you plant them alongside each other, they're probably both going to die because they both have very specific care instructions that you may not know. So to give readers what they want, you've got to first understand what it is they're seeking. What are the conventions of your genre? If you're writing romance, you cannot have an axe murderer burst through the room at the end of the book and kill somebody. That's not a good plot twist. You have to understand emotionally what your fans are after, and we've got to give it to them. I want to talk about the different types of readers because understanding this took me a long time. And now that I know how they're different, I understand how to market differently to them, and they respond very differently to marketing. So occasional readers are sort of the final form of readers, if you will. Habitual readers are where we all start usually, where as a kid from age 8 to 23, I binged fantasy novels constantly. But by the time I was in my early 20s, I was married and I had video games and I had, Netflix, and I had all sorts of other distractions in school. Well, occasional readers, because they now have their time at a premium, they care about quality. That's the only thing that matters to them. But they tend to have more money in their pocket, so they'll pay full price and they'll buy all of your books. As a good example, Butcher just bought the new book in the Dresden File series. I bought it full price. I don't even know what the cover price was. I don't know what he was asking. I just clicked buy. I didn't even look. That's an occasional reader because I'm so interested in the story and I'm so invested at this point that he could have put $100 on there. While I would have been annoyed that it had been $100, I probably still would have paid it. That's the power of occasional readers. But occasional readers are extremely difficult to woo. They aren't going to commit unless they're positive that the experience they're about to enjoy is going to be amazing. And they'll only stick around for that one experience. They're not going to read your whole backlist. If you're Jim Butcher, they're reading the Dresden Files. They're not reading Codex Alera. They love Audible because they're not going through books very quickly, and Audible tends to be expensive for binge readers. So I sell a lot of audiobooks to this crowd. Habitual readers are very different. They need to read a minimum of 30 books a month. Some of them read 60. Some of them read more. It's just crazy how many they can binge. There's contests. It's really kind of a pissing contest. How much can they read? They really brag about it and they post on social media about it. Habitual readers love Kindle Unlimited because they can read infinitely and never have to pay more than one annual price. So most of my cage reads are coming from Kindle Unlimited. Most of my sales are coming from occasional readers. They'll devour your entire backlist. I have them come in and they'll start with, let's say, a dragon tearing apart a starship. and they'll decide they want to be a writer by the end of it, and then they'll read all of my nonfiction books. So by the time this habitual reader is done, they've read all of my fiction and all of my nonfiction. I've made a nice, pretty penny. But 6 months from now, they can't remember who I am. They have no idea who I am because they've read 200 books since they last read one of mine, and so they don't have that loyalty that occasional readers do. The upside, though, is that habitual readers are very good at persuading occasional readers. So if I prospect for habitual readers and they say, hey, this series is good, then the occasional readers will take a chance on it. So you want a mix of both of them. I don't shortchange either group, even though, in my opinion, occasional readers are worth more long-term. Either way, our responsibility, if we want a career as authors, is to build a community where readers can thrive. You are not just an author. You are giving them a lifestyle that they can really subscribe to, where they can come in and talk about books and post memes and do all that fun social media stuff with geeks who happen to also love Rune Lords. You want to find a group of people who can bond around a specific concept and really breathe life into it and help you, because those fans are excited and will go out and find other fans. Like, they don't need to be asked to do this. They want to go find other converts like it's a religion and bring them into your group. And all you have to do is give them free stuff. So write a new short story, get some new cover art, hang out occasionally, do Q&As, just nurture that community and try and interact with them. I'm in there every single day and I answer literally every question. So I have a role-playing game, as you'll see throughout the presentation. It has a robust rule set, and so I'm always getting questions about how the rules work or about lore. I answer every one of those in the community, and so anybody who comes in there can see, wow, this author interacts with his group, and they love that, and so that group just keeps growing. And I give way more than almost anybody else that I've ever met. So I built them an entire world where I put all of my lore, all of my information, like the Similarian. As the Similarian is to Lord of the Rings, my World Anvil is to my work. And you can read all the lore, all the information, see all the characters, the maps, all sorts of great information up here. And the rules of the role-playing game are available for free. So if you as a gamer can't afford to buy the role-playing game, you can still play it by just looking at the rules online. And they thanked me by making that role-playing game a reality. So when I put up a Kickstarter and said, okay, guys, I actually want to print a hardcover book and put this role-playing game on the market and start selling it and playing it, will you guys help me? They said, sure, Chris, we would love to help you. Here's $30,000. The role-playing game is now available online. I'm selling copies, like way more than I would have thought that I could have sold, because this audience brought this to life for me. And there's no way I could have done this without my audience. And my audience is super tiny. I have a very small audience compared to some of the heavy hitters out there. If you are Critical Role, you're dealing in 8-figure sums, 8-figure sums, over $10 million. So for those that don't know, Critical Role is a bunch of voice actors who get together around a table and play Dungeons & Dragons every week. That's it. That's the whole shtick. They play D&D on camera. And so when they came to their audience and said, hey guys, we would like to make an animated TV show. Can you give us some cash? They're all, sure, here's $11 million. That show has now been licensed by Amazon. And these people don't have any claim to fame beyond the fact that they just roll some dice around a table. It made their career because they did nothing but give to their community, nothing but tend to their orchard. Now, everything we've done thus far has been somewhat touchy-feely, but I want to leave you with a hard lesson that you can walk away with and apply immediately. And this is the life cycle of a book. So for those of you that have backlists right now, this will be very relevant. And for those of you that don't, as you're gathering them, this will become more and more relevant. When I first started in this industry, something like, I want to say 82% of my income came from my backlist. So if I didn't put out a new release, I starved. Now, almost 2/3 of my income comes from my backlist. And so if I put out a new release, great. If I don't, that's fine too. Our goal is to get to that point. And to get there, you need to understand sort of the natural cycle that a book follows. And it's very similar to how real world crop rotation works. So if you plant, let's say, cotton, that's going to leach all of the nutrients out of the soil. Eventually you've got to plant peanuts, and we're all familiar with the phrase, oh, that's worth peanuts, because peanuts were worthless effectively since people grew them to sort of recharge their fields. They repeated that until the soil was enriched, and then they grew cotton again. Well, we have kind of a similar life cycle for our books. And I'm going to go through each of these phases, explain to you what they mean, and then show you how I use them in my own backlist with real data. So it begins with the new release window. You release the first book in the series and you've opened your new release window. And then it ends when the launch window for the final book in the series is complete. So generally, like let's take Harry Potter as an example. When the 7th book, Deathly Hallows, came out, we had like 90 days of fanfare where everyone wanted to read that book and everybody wanted to know how Harry Potter ended, and we all did it, and then everybody forgot it existed for a while. Well, when people start forgetting and that last book, the fanfare has died down, now you've got to start thinking about the next phase. Now, what makes the new release phase the new release phase is I am only discounting the first 2 books in the series. If I have a 7-book series, you're only ever going to see books 1, 2, and 3 drop to 99 cents. Book 4 plus is always going to be full price because that's where a lot of my profit is coming from. When you look at my graphs, you're going to see in the beginning of sales a lot of red because you're getting that raw sales number. And later, when I discount the book, that's where the Kindle Unlimited comes in. So when you enter the full discount window, I will discount all 7 books in a series, or 6 or whatever I've got, to 99 cents at the same time. And what Amazon will do, they'll run something called a Kindle countdown deal. So normally they'll pay you 33 cents if you're listing your book for 99 cents. But during a 7-day window, they'll pay you double. So you'll get 70 cents for a 99-cent book. And if you have 7 books all earning 70 cents, the money starts adding up really quick, especially since you're also getting Kindle Unlimited. And what'll happen is all 7 books will rise and rank at the same time. You'll dominate the charts in whatever genre you happen to be in, and you'll make a ton of money selling these books. More importantly, what's happening in the background is as Amazon is selling books, it's comparing each person that bought a book, and it's looking for patterns. What do all these people have in common? Well, if you sell 5,000 books to your target audience, Amazon now knows exactly who your target audience is and can sell to them for the rest of your career. So one of the advantages of the full discount window is that you can really zero in on your audience. And I do that, and then I kind of watch that audience going forward. Eventually, you're not making the money you want to from discounting. People are tired of seeing it. You're doing it every 3 months. So you have to escalate again. And I will typically release a box set. I'll do a trilogy or a quadrilogy. It's important that you be aware that this is going to murder the sales of your existing component books. So don't do this if your books are selling. But if you're at a point where you're just not having this series sell, you can always unpublish a box set later. So it can be a temporary window, but during that window, you make amazing money because the value proposition is so much better. I can get 1 book in a series I don't know, or I can get 4. And if you're an audio listener, then they go by number of hours for a single credit. So if you've got a book that's 54 or 66 hours like I do, it's a no-brainer. People are going to take that over a 12-hour book or a 6-hour book. And so your sales are once again pushed. And in some cases, this is it for your career. You just push this box set forever. It's your anchor. You're just making tons of money. Optionally, if the box set is no longer making money and you really want to push the envelope, you can attempt a full series box set, which I did recently with my Magitech Chronicles. I've done that before with Void Wraith. And in both cases, they become my most profitable products for that year. And in the case of Void Wraith, for all time. Because while I'm only getting 33 cents for a sale, I'm selling them a complete 7-book series for 99 cents. I get $9 for Kindle Unlimited page reads when somebody reads that series, and something similar for the audio sale. So what I'm doing is getting to the top of the charts because it's an impossible to ignore proposition. Everybody who sees this buys it. I shot all the way up into the top 100 on all of Amazon. It was #1 in every one of its genres. And it sat there for a long time and just printed money. Eventually, though, no matter what phase you're in, if it's the box set or the complete series box set, people are going to get tired of it. If you push it for 5 years, and so finally you're going to let fallow, just like maybe a farmer would let their fields lie fallow. You're not going to promote that. You're going to switch to another genre and promote that instead, or another series, and work on that, and let the first series that you promoted to death just sort of, lie fallow. And you'll re-release that alongside new content. So I put out a sequel series in the same universe. And when I did that, that's when I put out the complete series box set and really pushed. And all of a sudden I breathed life into sales where they had been flagging before. So what this ends up looking like, this is my military science fiction ebook income. This is the one that put me on the map. When you put out the books in the beginning, you have those big sales spikes and you get a fair amount of page reads, and then you have those long tails. And you can see in July of 2017, that's when I released the second trilogy. Did not do as well as the first trilogy. My covers didn't hit the mark. I learned a harsh lesson. And then it went into the long tail and I produced no new content. When you see that huge spike in July of 2019, that's not me putting out new books. That's me repackaging old content as box sets and just reaping the rewards for content I haven't touched in years. And I do this across all of my genres. So this is my space fantasy ebook income. It's much more consistent because I'm releasing a lot more books in this genre. This is my favorite genre. I really love this one. Dragons tearing apart starships. Writing epic fantasy in space is a lot of fun. And I'm doing a lot more of it. Post-apocalyptic, this is my very first series. You saw that, No Such Thing as Werewolves. It's designed to look like a horror series, but in reality is a post-apocalyptic thriller. And if I had known more about marketing, I would have done a different cover. But you know, that's water under the bridge. I wrote the first 4 books in this series and realized it's not going to sell. It's not as marketable as I want it to be. I've got to wait a while before putting out book 5. And so what you see here is my longest fallow phase, where I didn't market it at all because I didn't want fans to be like, where's book 5, Chris? There's no ending to this series. So you see in October of 2019, I finally realized, oh, I got the series in the can. You know, here's book 5, I can put that out. So I started advertising again and all of a sudden made crazy money, and then put out book 5. And you can see, you can't see how well it's doing, but the last month of my chart there, you can see I started making more money again because I had that sequel out. And what you end up with is a bunch of interleaved series that form your complete backlist. And these series are all at different phases. So let's say you hire an advertising firm to advertise for you and you teach them this methodology. They know how, when, and why to advertise every one of your books based on its position in that life cycle of a book. So understanding that life cycle means your backlist runs itself. So this is why I haven't had an ebook month under $10,000 in years, and why I don't really even need to think about it. You know, I can take a little bit more time to plot my releases these days because my backlist carries me. And finally, the pool of readers, I believe, resets roughly once every 3 years, give or take a year, depending on the genre. So if you watch how I'm following the cycle of readers, 3 years from now, when I promote space fantasy again, after I've let it die down, it's going to be a whole new group of people that are seeing it. Either the people still in the genre are ready to reread it because it's been a few years, or more likely they've moved on and are now reading some other genre, and the people in that genre are brand new. So that's the basic presentation, guys. I burned through it as fast as possible to leave room for questions because I think that's the most valuable part of the presentation. I am an open book, whatever you want to know.
Okay. Folks, go ahead and put your questions into the group chat. There were a couple of questions. First thing, somebody asked why your name had changed. You'd written under a couple of different names with using your initials at one point, that kind of thing.
I actually put that in there so somebody would ask the question. You should separate your pen names if you have different genres. So in other words, I should have done CT Fox for nonfiction and Chris Fox for fiction, because Amazon doesn't understand that those two things are very separate. And so it's trying to sell my fiction books to nonfiction fans, which overall lowers my impact and my sales and means that my books don't do as well. I didn't choose to do that. And if you actually look on Amazon, everything is under the pen name Chris Fox. So it was basically a cautionary lesson I dropped in there in the hopes of drawing out a question.
Okay. Next question. How many books do you publish a year? And do you try to work on a particular series at a time? Or are you dividing them up and saying, I'm going to publish 2 books in this series and 1 in that? How do you do that?
I tend to divide it up. So I will write what I think is hottest on the market and paying rent, which is hard as a pulp writer because fans want endings to series. And it's not until now that I can finally kind of dig my heels in the sand and write the series that I want to write that I'm able to give fans the answers that they want. So my Deathless series I started in 2014. I was putting out 2 books a year back then. These days I'm putting out 6 to 8. Most of those are in my hotter genres like space fantasy. I am trying to write a minimum of 2 books a year that are just kind of finishing old series that I want to get endings to, like Deathless. But the sad reality is you can see the difference in sales. If I write a $130,000 Deathless novel, I could have written 2 Burt novels that would have sold way, way better. And you know, when you live in the part of California I live in, how much you're making matters. And I've had to make some compromises. More and more I don't, though. And I think if I was to talk to a new author today and say, how should you do this going forward? You want to be David Weber. You want to write a whole bunch of books in the same genre, ideally in the same series, and create one flagship series. And if I had it to do over again, that's what I would have done.
Okay. Next question. How do you build your mailing list? You talked about doing a lot of giveaways, and I thought that was pretty good advice, but any particular tips on that?
Yes, I started thinking much more like a reader. So lots and lots of people are trying to give stuff away, and they're giving away anything they happen to have as opposed to something that their readers actually want. I really craft my giveaways with great care, my reader magnets. I think about what is it exactly that my fans are going to want. So I'll get a special piece of artwork commission that I'll only share with them, that sort of thing. And fans really, really appreciate that. You have to think about your specific audience. So if your audience, if they love Rune Lords, for example, I would do character sheets for every major character and show what their abilities are, and how many, God, I can't remember what the people that they steal their abilities from are. I haven't read your series in like 30 years. In any case, I would give more details about the series, the world building, stuff that you have for free or already laying around. If you've written up a bunch of world building material and it's on your hard drive or in a Scrivener document or a Word file, that's perfect. They would love to read your notes. So just give them stuff that you have available you think they're interested in, but it is much more about what they want and less about what you have available.
Okay, I think that's excellent advice. Do you prefer to go exclusive with Amazon or wide? You sound like you're exclusive to me.
I am, and I don't recommend it like in terms of long-term, it's a good business plan for us as a community. Nobody wants Amazon to be the 800-pound gorilla, but they are. And so if I can make, $17,000 in Kindle Unlimited sales, or I can not be exclusive with Amazon, go wide and be at every other major platform, and all other platforms put together make me $3,000, it's a no-brainer. I was just leaving too much money on the table. Amazon won, it's over. There's nobody who's going to make you a ton of money elsewhere. And so for exclusivity in Kindle Unlimited, it's good to remember that it's not permanent. If I do exclusivity with Amazon right now, in 6 months, I can decide to take everything out on the same day and then list it all wide. And I have put all my stuff wide. I sold it on Apple. Apple had me down to their Cupertino campus, and I worked closely with iBooks, and I tried to get in bed with them and help them. And what I learned is, Kobo and Apple and all these other companies, they're tiny. They just don't have the marketplace. And so we really have to play ball with Amazon. And the sad thing with the audio side of it is if you are exclusive with Amazon, they'll also give you iTunes. So you get both of the largest 2 stores in the world. You can't not do it.
Yeah, I agree. I've been studying it, and it just seems to make so much sense. I think you're dead on everything you've said so far. I'll just put it that way. Okay, so let's say you write a book, it doesn't sell well. How do you recover from that? Do you look at repackaging, bringing it out again later, or do you just leave and move on?
I have a book called Relaunch Your Novel. and you don't need to buy the book. I can tell you the salient bits of it right now. Books can and should be relaunched throughout your career. You should be doing omnibuses and special editions, and whether it's successful or not. If you put out your first 2 books in a series and you sell a grand total of 8 copies and your covers are terrible, in 3 years, you can buy new covers and repackage it. You can unpublish those books, create brand new ASIN numbers. And as far as Amazon's concerned, that is an absolute brand new product. So for me right now, and I encourage anybody who has access to the internet right now to Google Hero Born on Amazon and look at that cover. It looks like your creepy Uncle Phil is peering over your fence at your kids. I mean, it's terrible. That was one of my first books, and it was the first bad cover that I put out, and I've left it in place because I use it as a cautionary tale. Well, this year, I'm finally relaunching Hero Born. It's a great book, and fans love it, but because of that cover, it didn't sell, and it never will. But if I replace that cover and I run myself a well-crafted relaunch, I can all of a sudden tell the entire free world, and as far as they're concerned, this is brand new content. So what I'll do is I'll write book 3, and then I'll re-promote books 1 and 2, and I'll tell my entire list, and I'll do a bunch of mailing list swaps with all the other top authors in the world. And so we'll tell 500,000 fans, hey, the series exists, and I'll let them drive it to the top of the charts on Amazon, and Amazon will do the rest.
Okay, great. So Rania asks, should you spend for ads on a first book in a series if book 2 won't be out for or ready for another year?
I tend to run a $5 ad if I can afford it. So it has more to do with your budget and less to do with whether it's worth doing. Because your goal there long-term is to get those readers on your list. The best way to get people onto your list is in the front and back matter of your book, include the link to your reader magnet. So put a picture of your short story. Hey, if you want to know about the protagonist's background, go sign up and we'll give you this free short story. And you're using that to prospect for people on your list. So if you have a single $5 day ad, you're going to be selling a few books, getting a few reviews, and getting a trickle of people to your list while you're preparing book 2. And then maybe when book 2 comes out, you increase that to $10 a day. So each book's getting $5. And as you can afford to spend more, you're adding more. And then as sales roll in, you pour that back into ads. and book 3 comes out, and you sort of snowball from there. But I don't think any author has to advertise until they have a profitable funnel. So I do a lot of consulting, I charge a lot for it, and I'll talk to authors who have large backlists and no backlist. And if you don't have a backlist, no reason to advertise. You have 60 books, yeah, we're definitely gonna set up some advertising.
Okay. Can you describe your writing process? Like, how in depth do you plot versus, do your outlining? How many drafts do you do from start to finish? Do you dictate, use editors, proofreaders? Is your process pretty stable and repeatable? Or do you kind of rediscover from book to book?
My process is discoverable and repeatable and well documented. I have a YouTube channel with hundreds of videos, and the very first thing that I kicked this channel off with was called the 21-Day Novel Challenge. And what I arrogantly said is, all right, guys, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to write and edit a novel on camera in 3 weeks. I'm going to do 2 drafts. I'm going to publish that to Amazon. It's going to sail right up to the top of the charts. I'm going to make a crazy amount of money. That big spike, the first big spike you saw on the chart, that was the 21-Day Novel Challenge. I wrote that novel, I edited it, I showed exactly how my process worked, I put it up on Amazon and went from there. And over God, was that 4 years ago, 5 years? Over the intervening 5 years, I've put out videos on every part of my process. So I've covered everything from the snowflake method to Dan Harmon's story circle to my own book, Plot Gardening. I use a very hybrid process. So I'll write an outline, but I don't like being beholden to the outline. And I feel like over time, you may need to make alterations. So my plot gardening process is a hybrid and allows you the freedom to tell the story you want to tell and do things that I call plot branching, where you're not sort of nailed to this outline, but also you have to work with story structure so you have a good story and good characters. So check out Plot Gardening if you're interested. I put all of my books on sale for 99 cents for the pandemic for writers. So I haven't raised those again. So if you're interested, now's a great time to pick them up. I do use dictation occasionally. I've only just started doing that again. If you read my very first nonfiction book, 5,000 words per hour, I used to stand at the bus stop every morning on my way into San Francisco for my software engineering job, and I would dictate into my phone because that was the only time I could do it. Now that I can sit at my desk, I prefer typing, but I had my son in December, so time is at a premium, and so now all of a sudden dictation is a lot more attractive. I don't use editors anymore. I used to use them very heavily, so I would do a developmental editor and a line editor, and then a couple of different proofers, and then beta readers. What I learned is you don't need most of that stuff once you know how to write. So learn your craft, but once you've mastered your craft, you can get away with line editors and proofers. And so how we write a book is I write 5 chapters. I send those 5 chapters to my wife. My wife proofs those 5 chapters. She sends them back to me. I send them out to the list. They find any last minute typos. We serialize the book to the list that way. And by the time we're ready to release it, 3 weeks after I've started writing it, it's as clean as it's going to get. There's probably a few typos in there, not many. And we put it up on Amazon. And the very last few typos are caught when we send it to the audiobook production crew and they make the audiobook. So by the time the book is live, there's usually a few typos. Most people don't complain about those. And then a month down the road, I've uploaded an absolutely clean version. So lots of authors are horrified that you would release a book with typos. But when you have this kind of startup mentality production schedule, you're just getting books out too quickly, not to kind of shortcut parts of the process. And it hurts. But it made me feel a lot better when I read Jurassic Park and saw the number of typos in that book.
So can you give us an overview of your book, 5,000 Words in an Hour? You've mentioned it, and sounds like you're dictating, basically, but anything else you did to prepare for it, that kind of thing?
Yeah, the title is a gimmick. Obviously, it's designed to get you to look at it. But what the process is you're blocking out all distractions. And you're creating what John Cleese would call a tortoise enclosure, where your little tortoise mind can come out and play, do your own thing, and you can be creative. And you have to set up boundaries of space and boundaries of time, where from 8 to 8:30, I'm going to sit on this park bench in this location, and I'm going to dream about writing, and then I'm going to jot down my notes. And you do that every single day. And the neuroscience part of it is if you train your brain to get into flow state in the same place at the same time every day on a timer, if you run writing sprints, then your brain learns to generate words very quickly. So I can now get into flow state in probably 5 seconds or less. I turn off the internet and boom, words are flowing onto the page. And I record this all the time online and people are just fascinated by it. It's a practice skill. And all you're doing is blocking out the entire world and setting a timer and say, okay, I'm going to write until that timer goes off. Or in some people's cases, they hate the timer. You turn the timer off and you write until you finish the chapter. You don't get to go back and edit. You don't get to go back and modify it. You can't navel gaze. You can't look anything up. If there's a character name you don't know, or there's a word you can't define, you put XXX in, or like a variable, or something, so you have to do it later, and then you catch that stuff in editing. And so I write all in one pass. I get words down very, very quickly. My actual words per hour is about 3,300. I only get over 5,000 if dictating. It's totally cheating. Dictation is amazing. But when writing, 3,000 words an hour is more than enough for me to crank out the books I need to crank out. I can't tell if he's muted. I can't hear Dave.
Sorry about that.
There you go.
Yeah, when I teach my writing and chanting prose class, I talk about reaching the theta state, and it is a practice skill where you learn to block out the time. You have to block out your emotions and just say, this is what I'm going to do at this time today, and you do it. And when you do it, your prose tends to come out extremely clean and professional and needs practically no rewriting. So everything you're saying makes perfect sense, at least to me. Okay, let's see. Would you explain full discount window at Amazon, please?
Sure. So
yeah.
The full discount window for me, it's a made-up term, something I'm inventing. It's just the idea that for this period of time, I'm willing to discount all the books in a series. So normally I would never discount the later books in a series. If you've got a 12-book series, book 12 should always be full price. But when you're in the full discount series, then even book 12 is going to drop to 99 cents. And most of the reason I'm doing that is to capitalize on Kindle Unlimited and on the data science of Amazon for them to peddle this book out to as wide an audience as possible.
Okay, great. Here's an interesting question. She says, I want to commission a cover for an epic fantasy. Should I try to emulate traditional covers or indie covers?
Indie covers, because indies actually know how to sell books. What we are doing is capitalizing on symbology. So if you think back to your 8-year-old self when you picked up your first fantasy novel, maybe it was a dragon, maybe it was a throne, maybe it was a sword, maybe it was a crown. These are powerful symbols that stick with us to adulthood. And so now if I drop a dragon next to a starship or a suit of power armor on a ship, I've told the reader so much because these powerful emotional symbols are available to them and they're being drawn to them. So when they're looking down a list of thumbnail images on Amazon, your thumbnail image is the most important part of your cover. It's not how it looks full size. It's how it looks as a tiny little image. And if they can't make out a symbol, look at all of my covers. Like go to Amazon right now, search for Chris Fox, and start looking at how small those thumbnails are and the fact that all of my titles are legible and you can make out a symbol on every one of them. You can see a dragon, you can see a planet, you can see a starship. That is what makes for good cover design, and indies know this. We understand that if you're not doing that, you're not going to sell books. And it's not about the name of the artist. Michael Whelan is great, but a Michael Whelan cover is not going to sell books today. It's just not going to happen. You need an indie artist. I've got a guy that's working out of Taiwan. I've got another guy working out of Germany, and I tell him exactly what I want. I give him a mock-up, and 3 days later, I have a beautiful piece of artwork. So every piece of art you see me using is custom made, and they tend to range between $300 and about $1,000.
Great, great. So the next question actually has to do with covers too. How much did you pay for your first cover? How much do you pay for covers now? Talk about the importance of a good cover.
Sure, there's 2 steps to cover design that are important, and I didn't understand these are very different. There's the artwork, and then there's the typography. And most artists are not good at typography. So what I will do is typically pay an artist. On my first cover, that was $300 for the artwork. And then I pay somebody else, and I think it was $200 back then for the typography. So prices have not risen that much on typography. I'm still paying just a couple $100 to get some stellar typography on artwork. But the price of artwork has, because I've gone to better and better people. I tend to try to use with pre-made covers or an unknown artist, you can get them as cheap as $200. You can really work all the way up to $1,200 or $1,500 if you're getting somebody who's highly sought after. But if you own the rights to the artwork, that's absolutely worth it in my opinion, because I use my artwork in the role-playing game, I use it on covers, and I use it, in advertising. So you're getting a lot of bang for your buck if you're paying for that cover artwork.
Next question. If you would you compare how much you? Oh, let's see. We got that one. Sorry, I had to scroll here. You'd love to hear more about audiobook methodology and also more about Kickstarter experiences.
Audiobooks are the fastest growing market right now. It's where more of my money is coming from. For the first time ever, I made more from audiobooks than I did from ebooks last month, which is crazy. when you're getting those big 5-figure checks for audiobooks, it's just insane. How the process works is you go to a site called acx.com, you claim your book from Amazon, and then you list an audition. And it's like usually the first 15 minutes of your book, first 5 chapters or so. And then you say, I'm looking for a narrator that sounds like this. So for example, when I put up The Dark Lord Bert, I said, I want someone that can sound just like David Attenborough. This is terribly raunchy stuff, and I want somebody cultured and British reading it because it'll be hilarious. And sure enough, I had like 15 auditions, and the guy that I selected used to work for National Geographic. It was absolutely perfect for the role. You can choose to pay them a fixed per hour price. So you could say, okay, I'm gonna pay you $400 for each hour of finished audio that you complete, or you can do a royalty split where you get half the profit and they get half the profit. It's usually in your best interest if you're successful to pay up front, but I usually offer the royalty split because my narrators are invested. So if you go with somebody like R.C. Bray, who I would never in a million years use, I mean, I know Ray pretty well, he's just in such high demand that he's not gonna do the next book in your series when it comes out. And so you're gonna have fans that are waiting for stuff. So I go to ACX, I pick a narrator that's really good, but it's probably unknown, and I partner with them so that they make a ton of money. So Ryan Kennard Burke, the guy you see on most of my novels, he had $80,000 in student loans in 2014. And now because of our books, he's paid that off and has an investment portfolio. So you can help make these people a ton of money, and they're very invested in your success. Hopefully that answered the question.
And then the Kickstarter, they want to know a little bit about your Kickstarter experiences.
Oh, Kickstarter is amazing. I can't say enough good things about Kickstarter. There's also a rival site called Indiegogo where you can run them at the same time. Fans want to give you money. They really do. And your super fans want to give you a lot of money. So if you look at my Kickstarter page, if you Google Kickstarter Magitech Chronicles, look at some of the top tier rewards. The top tier reward was $5,000 for a $20 role-playing game, and somebody did it. And lots of the lower tiers were 600, 400. I mean, and what I'm offering to do is put characters in novels, write a short story that I was going to write anyway, but I'll use them as the character, send them an autograph set of my books for $500. I mean, there are so many ways that you can give them something that is an amazing connection with their favorite author, and they'll give you a bunch of money for it. So when doing a Kickstarter, I thought it was important to craft rewards that I thought my audience would really love. I learned a lot in the process. So my next Kickstarter, which will happen in 90 days or less actually now, we'll learn from the lessons that I sort of stumbled upon. Kickstarter, the beauty of Kickstarter is anytime somebody expresses interest in your Kickstarter, if they let's say browse and look at what you're selling, your novel, your audiobook, your role-playing game, and then they decide not to buy or not to back immediately, anytime you release an update, they're still going to hear about it. And anytime you do another Kickstarter, they're going to hear about it too. So if you do a Kickstarter, let's say every 60 days, and you just keep putting out books and you keep doing Kickstarters for each book you put out, it grows over time. And I now know somebody who his last Kickstarter was $90,000 for a book. And so it's not even on Amazon yet. It's up for pre-order, and he's made $90,000 off of this book. I mean, it's just crazy. So Kickstarter is a wonderful way for us to allow our fans to express their love for us. But it requires a lot of know-how, and you want to be very careful about physical rewards and fulfillment. You don't want to give away books or anything you have to mail or ship. All of my rewards tend to be digital. If I am selling something physical, it's usually fulfilled directly by a site like DriveThruRPG. It's not me mailing a bunch of books out of my garage. So Kickstarter can be a great tool, but also be very cognizant of the cost. It's not free money.
Okay, great advice. Okay. Someone made a comment here, and I just want to put it in more as a comment. You're talking about the fact that traditional publishers don't know how to sell books the way that indies do, and this is exactly right. They've got a different marketing schedule or a different way of looking at things. And one of the ways that they look at it is that they pay a lot of money for cover art that, as you say, doesn't necessarily sell books. Having the best cover artist in the world doesn't help if you can't see the illustrations and get to those key symbols. And so they're basically based on the assumption that whoever we pay the most money for, that's going to give us the best cover. The best cover is going to sell the most books. And that's kind of an outdated concept, and it's going to be easily disprovable. So I just wanted to get that into the comments because people who are watching this later are not necessarily going to be able to read what's going on in the chat, or at least they don't seem to.
Can I interject something, Dave?
Sure.
We ran a conference last summer. So this is most of the top science fiction authors in the world. And I gathered them together. They came to basically my house. They came to Napa, California. And we had people like David Weber and Kevin J. Anderson. And I don't want to denigrate them. Like, I don't want to say anything rude, but these people had no clue how to sell books. Not a clue. And, you know, they're both heroes from my childhood, and we showed them the ropes. And so now here we are a year later, and I'm watching Kevin J. Anderson and David Weber co-author a bunch of books with people from that conference because we know how to sell books. And they're like, oh, my name will sell books. We'll strap it onto somebody who understands how data science works, and they know how to do a cover, and then we'll make a ton of money. If you are a successful author already and you have any name from any decade, that's very valuable right now. Like, Dave, your books are gold. I mean, we all know who you are.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I'm looking at reinventing myself for the times, you know, is really what's going to happen, because I look at it and I say, yeah, I love what you're talking about. I love the idea of saying, okay, I'm going to get a bunch of books out, because when you're doing it in the old days, we were told, oh, we don't want more than a book a year, you know, and so you're sitting here on your heels half the time trying to figure out what to do with your day, because your publisher doesn't want you to be writing. And that was just insane, quite frankly.
They were selling paper back then.
Yeah, they were worried about the paper. So anyway, makes an awful lot of sense. Let's see. Just going down is, let's see, I'm looking for more things. Talking about Kickstarter. I don't see any more questions here. Did I miss anything? Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask a question if you need to. Okay.
I actually had a question about generating lists, and I just wanted to get a better understanding of how you do that. Do you do it on a website? Do you have a company helping you with that? But how are you getting those lists generated so you can market to those people?
So you typically use the site BookFunnel to host your books. That's what you're giving away. The BookFunnel site will allow you to create a landing page. That's bookfunnel.com. It'll allow you to create a landing page where you collect the email address, and then it'll dump it into a system like, let's say, MailChimp or MailerLite, which is how you're sending out your email. So I use something called ConvertKit. ConvertKit is more expensive, but it has a lot more capabilities and allows me to reach specific segments of my audiences more granularly, which is very, very important. So I use that, but I would start with something like MailerLite or MailChimp because they're cheaper. They're free if you're under 2,000 subscribers. And then you put the link that you've generated in the front matter and back matter of all of your books on your website, tattoo it on your forehead, wherever else you can put it, so that you can get people interested in checking out your list. And all you have to do is give them an offer. You know, here's the short story that I wrote about the protagonist. That's a simple first step. It could be anything else that you want, but put that link everywhere you can and you're good to go.
Chris, will the slides be available at some point? You went
yeah,
through
I can
really
send to you right now.
fast.
Yes, and there's also a recording of basically this presentation on my YouTube channel. It's called Marketing is Farming, Not Hunting. So you can watch me kind of give the same presentation with a few slightly different slides. If you Google, or just go to YouTube/Chris Fox Writes, and you'll see the video there. And I'm actually sending the slides to Dave right now. And I'm an open book. So my email address is chris@chrisfoxwrites.com. I love disrupting the market and teaching new authors to do this. So it hasn't endeared me to the old guard, but I've helped a lot of people start doing this full time and get their books out there. And my angle, especially if you're a fantasy and science fiction author, is I want to read your stuff. Okay, slides for presentation.
I have a question about remarketing.
Sure.
I'm still new to this, but when you remarket, do you keep the same, what is it, the IP address, or the IP or the thing on your book, that in the database that goes to the library?
The ISBN.
Yeah, that.
That's up to you. So sometimes yes, and sometimes no. If I'm not attached to the reviews that are on that book, then I will oftentimes give it a brand new number and create a new product because it'll sell better. It's a new record in Amazon's database, and so it's going to perform a lot better as a result. That typically works better for me, and that's what I tend to do.
Did you do that when you had to change, like you said, you didn't have your name, you hadn't changed your name to separate your different types of genre?
the beautiful thing is you can change the author name at any time without changing an ISBN number. So every 3 days you could be a different author name and they wouldn't care.
Hmm.
And it doesn't have to match what's on the book. It should, but it doesn't have to match what's on the book either.
I have a question.
Thank you.
Sure.
Because I know that the romance writers do this, and I'm curious if you've seen this being effective in your newsletters with sci-fi. Do you share other people's books in your newsletter, and do you have them share yours? Do you see an uptick in that?
I can't believe we didn't talk about this. So what Dawn is talking about is the mailing list swap. And the mailing list swap is the currency of our industry. So I've got, let's say 16,000 military science fiction and epic fantasy fans. If you've got a book that'll fit that audience and you tell my audience about that book, in exchange, you're going to tell your audience about my book. And so I've done swaps with every major author in the world. It's a huge part of the power of how we sell. I cannot say enough good things about it, but there is a downside. If you're telling people constantly about not just your books, but other books, you are going to somewhat dilute the loyalty and the power of your list. So I don't like emailing my list a lot for other authors, but I will do it. And, the further into my career I go, the less swaps that I do, but they are the single most powerful tool for a new author. If you go to, I'm trying to think of what some of the better sites are. Any of the free giveaway sites right now where you can go like booksweeps.com and put up a book and get 1,000 email addresses from people that are downloading that book. They're not good people because they're freebie seekers, but then you do have some people on your list and you have something to work with. So if you were to go to another author in your genre, you could say, hey, listen, my mailing list is 1,500 people. They don't know that it's 1,500 people from a site of freebie seekers. If I tell my list about your book, will you tell your list about mine? And rinse and repeat. Swaps are enormously powerful, and this is across all genres. They do lose power over time. The more times people have seen your content across other people's lists, the less you'll sell. But the very first time your book is announced to other people's lists, you tend to sell gangbusters if it's in the right audience.
The other question I had, which is a totally different topic. I am both a writer and illustrator, and I'm working on several things. Do you see the graphic novels rising more and more with the models that you're talking about?
We don't know is the short answer. Comixology is the name of the comic platform where graphic novels and comics were sold.
Right.
And of course, Amazon bought it. And 8 days ago, I received an email from them saying basically that Comixology is dying and they're folding it all into Kindle. So now it looks like we can do comics and graphic novels and role-playing games directly through Kindle. We're still submitting through Comixology at this point, but hopefully those merge and they give us a better process and I can do it through my KDP dashboard. I don't know if people are going to be buying because I haven't sold a lot of them myself, but I think that they will, and I'm going to be trying to sell a lot of graphic novels and role-playing games myself.
Because I know like Sherilyn Kenyon did that with her novels, which are futuristic military romance, which is interesting. It has a huge following. Mm-hmm. And I know that she's been doing that with her fantasy novels as well. And so I was curious to see if we're seeing that happening in the indie as well. But I know the cost to do it is higher than some of the other.
Well, delivery costs are prohibitive as well, so you make a lot less money.
Yeah.
Because they're giving such a large file. So I still think it's a good revenue source, but audio is much, much better. Like if I had to pick between comics and audio, I would put all my effort into audio.
I've got a question for you. You mentioned that you do consultations with authors, and I got to thinking some of these people might be interested in that. What do you charge? Do you have an hourly charge, daily charge? How do you do that?
It's an hourly charge. I often have big name people come to me and say that I charge them a 4-figure sum. For real authors, I charge $500, and here's what this will cover. I spend about a half hour going over your backlist, looking at your covers, looking at your blurbs, and finding everything that I think is wrong and can be fixed. And then we have a phone call that's between an hour and 90 minutes, however much time you need, to discuss what you can do to take yourself to the next level. My job is to persuade you not to purchase a $500 hour of consultation. So if you email me at chris@chrisfoxwrites.com, we're going to have like 7 emails back and forth first. I'm going to ask you a whole bunch of questions like, did you do this? Are your covers already amazing? Why are you trying to pay me $500 when you don't have the best cover in the world? So feel free to reach out to me and just talk to me. I'm not going to charge you for that. And if it's a good fit, I'm happy to take your money, but I do very little consulting because I'd much rather be writing books.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. This has been an absolutely great hour. I think it's one of the most informative broadcasts we've had over the past 8 months, and so this is very helpful. And I suspect that we're going to be begging you to come on again sometime in the near future. So I'd like to thank you for that. And just remind everybody, we'll be having our next meeting on Tuesday, and we'll be speaking with Orrin Litvin, who will be talking about how to handle politics in your fiction, okay, beyond kings and queens and princes and princesses. So thank you all so much for coming today, and look forward to seeing you again on Tuesday. Bye-bye.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Okay.